Welcome back. As promised, it's straight away across to Ashmit now, who gives us the latest update on JSW Steel and what's come out of the court proceedings today.
Well, a major setback as far as JSW Steel and its plan for Bhushan Power and Steel is concerned. Bear in mind that this story goes back all the way to 2019. The whole insolvency process began in 2016. It went through the motions. In 2019 is when the NCLT had granted approval for JSW to proceed forward. Its resolution plan had been approved. It was nearly 20,000 crore rupees. Now, however, it has gone through the motions of challenge before the various courts and tribunals. It landed before the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court, from what we're picking up, is that it had taken objection to two aspects. Number one, the Supreme Court frowned on the fact that the resolution plan wasn't executed within the given time frame, which is a 30-day period, wasn't complied with, and that was the first ground for not having, for striking down this JSW resolution plan. The other is the Supreme Court has taken exception to how this transaction was put through, had been gone through by JSW, bringing in equity and convertible debentures. The Supreme Court's rationale was that only equity could have been brought in as per the proposed resolution plan. So on both these grounds, what the Supreme Court has essentially held is that as far as JSW Steel's resolution plan is concerned, it was illegal, should not have been accepted by the lenders, should not be allowed to proceed forward, and on that grounds, the Supreme Court making it clear, sending Bhushan Power into liquidation. So trying to close the chapter there, coming as a shocker, however, for JSW Steel. We'll, of course, have to wait and see if they choose to take the legal remedy of maybe appealing against this order in the form of a review petition. We'll have to ask. We'll have to get a confirmation from them if that's the legal remedy that they choose. But for now, a definite setback coming in.
Setback indeed for JSW Steel, now 6% lower on the stock after this. And Ashmit, thank you for that update. But Nigel with more on this. Nigel, tell us more.
Well, this is an absolute shocker, because as Ashmit said, that the process was initiated a few years ago and JSW Group took over this asset in 2021. In October 2021, JSW Steel, that's the listed entity, had 83% stake in this particular entity. And as of today as well, the last presentation says that they have 83% in this entity. Why is this important? When this asset was acquired, it was a 2.75 million ton unit. That unit got scaled up to around 3.5 million ton unit. And as of the last recorded number, the Bhushan Power asset, it contributes close to around 4.5 million tons on JSW Steel's consolidated capacity of around 35.7 million tons. So 4.5 on 35.7 million tons means it contributes around 13% of the total capacity. What about profitability? I'm looking at the last few numbers, and the EBITDA front, as a percentage of the total consolidated entity, it contributes close to around 10%. This is going to be a shocker because JSW Steel took over the asset, they turned it around, they put in money, and suddenly if this is going to be liquidated, how do you account for all that money? Because they put close to around 20,000 crores in this asset to take it over. And then, in fact, they put in further capex, and they also said that from 4.5 million tons, this capacity goes to around 5 million tons. So all of that is on the drawing board. How do you reverse all of this, with regard to the cash flows that have come in there, the capex that have taken place as well? So it'll be interesting to see whether or not there's a way out of this for JSW Steel. But otherwise, it's a negative. 10% of EBITDA, around 12.5 to 13% of capacity. It's come out of nowhere.
Oh, indeed. We've got, let's ask some of these. We've got Senior Advocate at Supreme Court, HP Ranina, now joining in on the show. And Nigel, do stay on to, throw in some questions. So first question is, will JSW Steel challenge, review it? Is there hope of any sort of, some sort of reconciliation for JSW Steel? And two, what happens legally now? The sunk cost into the asset in Bhushan Power, JSW Steel is invested in it, increase the capacity. What happens to that?
Well, on your first question, the answer is very simple. You can go on a review petition only if there is a fundamentally wrong error of judgment made by the Supreme Court, which I don't think is so in this case, because this is on the question of fact that you had said that you would only issue equity shares. You went in for convertible debentures as well, and this was in violation of the earlier order which was passed. So that is why the Supreme Court has held that this is illegal. Therefore, it cannot be reviewed. You cannot review something on factual errors where the factual error has been created. Therefore, I don't think a review petition will work. But the only thing that can work is that the JSW can go back to the Supreme Court and said, okay, we will only go by the equity route, which was earlier mentioned by us in our settlement scheme. And we will not issue the convertible debentures. And therefore, please review the order based on this new fact. that year after we will only take the equity route to infuse funds into Bhushan Steel. So that's the only way to salvage the situation. I don't think any other way will work.
All right. So, Mr. Ranina, there is a hope still for JSW Steel to still retain this asset.
Yeah, they can. Because otherwise it will be a write-off. As you rightly said, they've sunk so much money into the company, it will be a complete write-off. And that will be a huge drain on the balance sheet of JSW.
Indeed. And, the other problem is that, it sets a very difficult, outlook for the entire industry, for all these assets that get into trouble. And then you have some of these other companies that come in there. So it's not just for this asset, it will set a very negative sentiment for the entire industry. Just comment on that.
Yeah, I entirely agree with you. It will have a very, very dampening effect. And in fact, it will slow down industrial growth to some extent, especially for the steel industry. So the repercussions are substantial. And therefore, they can go back to the Supreme Court and said, look, these are going to be the repercussions. We have therefore decided to take the equity route alone. And therefore, please allow us to go ahead. That's the only way they can salvage the situation.
Right, Mr. Ranina, but I'm just surprised at the way, the amount of time this has taken place. Late in, I think, 2019 or thereabouts is when we started, hearing about the resolution of this case. JSW Group, I think they officially took it over in 2021. And at 2025, you're saying that something that was done earlier was amiss. Shouldn't this have been done earlier?
Yes, it should have been done earlier, but you can't help it. I mean, there may be so many other issues before the Supreme Court. Maybe there was a delay on the part of JSW itself. Their own lawyers may have delayed the matter. We don't know. But anyway, now nothing can be done. The judgment is final unless they come up with the original scheme of equity share issues.
So, Mr. Ranina, just to sum up what you're saying is JSW Steel still has a chance. They can appeal against this and they can salvage the situation and probably go according to the Supreme Court's, verdict and retain this asset. And that would be good, not just for them, but for the entire system. Because otherwise, there is capex that's put in, there are cash flows that they have got back, and they have ramped up this asset from around 2.75 million tons towards 4.5 million tons. So it'll be a win-win-win for everyone. If in fact JSW appeals, then gets, some kind of relief and goes according to what the High Court is saying. Is that correct?
That's correct. But it is not an appeal. It will be a review based on new facts. You can't appeal against the Supreme Court's own order. You can only ask them to review it. It will be a review based on the new facts which will be brought before the court.
And the new fact here, sir, will be that we will take over, we will complete the takeover only with equity and not a mix of equity and OCD. So they need to go back with that promise.
Absolutely.
Is there a possibility that the Supreme Court says no ways we want this to go into liquidation, or
No. I think if you point out all the repercussions of this order, the Supreme Court will, I'm sure, reconsider. They are not going to take a
Got it.
Why did it take so long for, just once again, I know you spoke about it and we've been discussing it, but still, it's, the judgment is going to come.
This is the unfortunate thing. Our judicial system works very slowly, and this has always been a big problem. And we have always hoped that the Chief Justice will do something to expedite the system. But unfortunately, the whole system continues. It's become so big, so fundamentally, entrenched. It's very difficult to change the system.
Okay. All right. Mr. Ranina, we appreciate you joining in. Thanks a lot for giving us your first take. Once we get further details, we request you to come back on the channel. So that's the word that's coming in from Mr. Ranina there. As of now, the Supreme Court has, their verdict goes against JSW Steel. But JSW Steel has an option to go ahead and request for them to review the, this particular petition. Because otherwise, it's going to be a mess for everyone, for the lenders.
Sure will, right? I mean,
that's what Ms. Ranina says, that they have a case out there to request for review and then go according to what the Supreme Court is saying. Otherwise, it'll be very difficult to account for all the investments that have gone in there, all the cash flows that have come off as well. And for JSW Steel, it now contributes 10 to around 12% of their total EBITDA as well as their capacity. So we'll have to wait by to see how this goes. For the time being, it's negative, but all is not lost. one would have hoped that this happened sooner rather than later. Because imagine you acquire an asset few years ago, 4 years ago to be precise, and then you get smacked back in 2025 itself. So I'm trying to get in touch with the JSW management. Hopefully one of the spokespersons as well come on the channel and clarify their stand.
Indeed. Just to confirm, so 10 to 12% of the EBITDA?
Yeah, EBITDA is around 10% as of now. In terms of capacity,
13%.
just to 12.5, 12.6%, I think a rough calculation told me. And the capacity now is 4.5 million tons. That goes to around 5 million tons. At the time of acquiring this asset, it was 2.75 million tons. That went to around 3.5 million tons. Now it's at around 4.5 million tons, which is headed to 5 million tons.
It's interesting there.
And 20,000 crores was the total money they put on the table.
Oh, 20,000 crores. That's a big number as well that has been pumped in by JSW Steel and showing on the price as well, right? 6% lower now on the stock at the lowest point of the day at 971 is JSW Steel. Of course, the two criteria cited by the Supreme Court include that they used optionally convertible debentures and not just equity, and of course failing to complete it within the prescribed timeline. And as Mr. Ranina also said, that the only way this can be salvaged now is a review petition that can be filed in the Supreme Court, and JSW Steel goes in to highlight the repercussions of such a move. But we call time on this edition of